Hello and welcome to Morning Call for Wednesday, the 8th of May, 2019. As you might have noticed, I took yesterday off. I was saying I might take a day off this week. Turned out to be yesterday. I hope that's okay. I worked all through the weekend. I had to get some rest. Also, you need to bear with me now and probably for a while because summer is coming. And this means my allergies are starting. And to do this podcasting, I need to take this cetirizine crap, which makes me very groggy in the morning. So the only thing that helps there is a copious amount of coffee today, brought to you by my Queen's Diamond Jubilee mug in honor of the latest royal child. Because breaking news, woman has baby. So, hello, I am the Queen. I approve of this broadcast. Yes. Good morning. How are you? I'm Fred from Hamburg. As usually, it's sunny and bright, which happens a lot this year. I'm not complaining. It's not very Hamburg, but that's what's going on. Anyway, let's get into the tech news. That's probably why you're here, not because of my waffling. Maybe because of my ranting, but not because of my waffling. I'm guessing. Anyway, we do have quite a lot of tech news. I had to cut some stuff out, obviously, because I wasn't there to report yesterday. But I think I've got some interesting news for you. First off, we have a story I've been following a long time. More news on the 737 MAX debacle at Boeing. Boeing now saying that a, quote, software delivered to Boeing was part of the problem. They are talking about this angle of attack warning that, the press, I think the New York Times and others had reported previously. They only basically, so this is modern planes. There are no dials. It's all like screens, right? Most of it is screens, and they can have different versions of the screens for you as a customer when you buy the plane. And the press was reporting that this angle of attack warning thing would only be activated if you actually bought it from Boeing. And Boeing is now saying, well, that's down to software we received, and but the more pressing thing. So if you want to know what this looks like, I'm here on the register. They have somewhere. Was it on this story? Was it on another story? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing the link now. I actually had a picture of what it looks like. But anyway, oh yeah, it's here. I clicked on link, so it's not that easily visible anymore. So there's this little red thing on the dial here, which will basically, it says stick shaker. It probably also makes your stick rumble. So the pilot knows, okay, if the angle of attack crosses this, we have a problem. We might crash. But the more interesting thing from the story is actually that Boeing knew of this problem because of this faulty, because of the software that was delivered to them. There was an internal review because of this, and that was before the first crash, which is now, I've been talked about this, which experts now say is probably due to this MCAS software, which was only, so the plane has two angle of attack sensors, and the software was only connected to one, which then, of course, if they both give different indications, the software might think, okay, the plane's stalling, the pilot is actually looking at a corrected, maybe, a view that it's, from both sensors, so that doesn't show anything wrong, but the software thinking the plane's stalling, pitches the nose down, and pilot pulls it back up, and that's how the two planes crashed. Now, that might have been prevented by this indicator, because that indicator would actually give a warning if both angle of attack sensors have different readings, which then would have caused the problems to go, okay, well, we have a problem here, and then they might have thought, well, okay, that's going to be a problem with MCAS to turn that off, and then that would have prevented the planes from crashing. But the more interesting thing is that Boeing knew this and had an internal review of this problem before the first crash. Although on the Register story, Boeing was reporting this to the regulators now and is saying senior company leadership was not involved in the review and first became aware of this issue in the aftermath of the Lion Air accident, which is the second crash. Problem here, though, is that doesn't really matter. I think they're just excusing top executives in this. But if the company knew and the top executives weren't made aware of this, then there's obviously an internal problem there. They obviously underestimated the problem, which obviously is a problem because two planes crashed. So that's gonna be more problem for Boeing down the line, I'm guessing. I think there has to be a major rethinking of how the FAA regulates these kind of things. Google had their big I/O developer conference in the US. I think it's still going on, but it kicked off yesterday with a lot of announcements. And the first one, interesting one, was actually that they will keep. So Google had bought a company called Nest, which made a lot of home devices. There were problems there with privacy reported on before, but then they own that, and they, interestingly, in a move, I think a new move for Google, they're not getting rid of the brand. They're doing the opposite. They're rebranding their home devices, the Google Home devices, under the Nest brand. So Google Home is now becoming Nest Home, which is a thing Google hasn't traditionally done. Usually they would just call everything Google something. I think this is me speculating, but I think this is a move because of, the Google brand has problems in the public perception. Google stands for privacy problems for a lot of people, and I think with a device like this, which is very intimate and in your home, and possibly records everything you say, maybe they don't want to have the Google name attached to it, because Google basically is now a synonym for bad privacy. So I don't know. I think maybe that's one of the reasons. I'm not the only one speculating about this. Heise in the story is kind of alluding to this as well. So they're going to rename everything. Google Home Mini is going to be called Nest Home, and smartphone apps also going to be called Nest. Nest, obviously, very cozy, warm-sounding name. In other news, they have also announced new phones, the Pixel 3a and Pixel 3a XL, which are kind of mid-tier smartphones, and are cheaper than the phones Google recently released. So they're basically the cheapest phones Google has released since they went to the Pixel brand and said, okay, we're producing these phones ourselves. I find it so the cheaper one is 399 euros, I think, which is still a lot of money. If you like me remember the days when Google was heavily subsidizing Android phones, and the Galaxy, not the Galaxy Nexus, the Nexus phones were 200 euros at some point, which I guess wasn't a sustainable price, and they were subsidizing it, but still. I love former colleague for me on Heise also talking about this, writing about these phones, and says Nexus owners might look back at the old days when phones were a lot cheaper from Google, and basically saying this is a return of the old times, but these are still twice as expensive as they were back then. And that's not down to inflation, that's just down to smartphone prices kind of skyrocketing. I just love smartphone journalists. They're like really funny. Like the Gollum colleague is going, well, this is like a traditional design without a notch, and I'm like, what do you mean tradition? That makes it sound like it's from the 1980s. I mean, I've never, like, my last phone I bought is now, I think it's not even 2 years old, right? And it doesn't have a notch. Like, it's an iPhone 7. It doesn't have a notch. Like, I never owned a phone that had a notch. It's not like the notch is such a design staple, has been a design staple for years now, that you can call phones that don't have a notch like classic design. No, that's just normal design. Anyway, I find that hilarious. In some open source and more like developer, and let's get into harder tech news here. The Oracle has, of course, transitioned Java or Java EE, like the Enterprise Edition, to the Eclipse Foundation. And the Eclipse Foundation, open source foundation, has been, they've released software called Jakarta, and they have been negotiating with Oracle on this move and on the trademarks. And Mike Milinkovic, the head of the Eclipse Foundation, has now published a blog post basically declaring the negotiations over, and says he's kind of contractually obligated by like the NDAs and whatever not to like judge these proceedings, but he basically gives the results, and basically the results are that the Eclipse Foundation is not able to use the Java EE trademarks, what they call the Java X brand, so Java something something, which is understandable. I mean, I've read lots of comments on this, and people saying, well, it's a big multinational company, they will not give up these trademarks. But the thing you have to remember, these are not like, it's not just names, because trademarks are tricky things, especially like with open source projects. Because I mean, if you know a little bit about Linux distributions, about like the stuff Debian is doing with Firefox, and Fedora, what they are doing with the Red Hat trademarks and stuff like that. And there are tricky things, and with Java, so if they're not allowed to call their stuff Java, I mean, that's okay. You'd be thinking, okay, it's just a name, but like all the packages are called Java something something, and so they can't use those package names anymore. So what they will do now probably is just call them Jakarta something something. But like if they, as Milinkovic says here, the Java X, he calls it the Java X package namespace. The Java X package namespace may be used with Jakarta EE specifications, but may be used as is only. No modifications to the Java X package namespace is permitted within Jakarta EE component specifications. So what this basically means is they can use, if there's an existing package, software package of Java, they can call that Java, whatever it's called, right? Java EE version 7.68 or whatever. I'm just making that up, by the way. I don't know a lot about Java. I've always never really liked that language. But anyway, it's a very important, obviously very important technology for not only open source, lots of stuff, especially in enterprise. And their problems now, if they want to develop new stuff, they can't call it, like, if there's a version, I'm making this up, don't at me, right? But like, if there's a version, Java EE 7.41, and they want to do 8, right? They want to do new development, then they can't call it Java EE 8. They can call it Jakarta 8, which is all well and good, but that breaks a lot of backwards compatibility. So yeah, it's looking like there has to be a complete like nuke, and they have to rename everything, break a lot of backward compatibility. I mean, it's not like that hasn't been done before, especially with MySQL and stuff, MariaDB, things like that. But especially in Java world, where like backwards compatibility is kind of like a bit like Microsoft. It's like the I don't know, like they can't just, it's like part of the core being of Java. It's like really hard to get rid of. Anyway, that will be interesting in the future. There's an interesting report from Symantec. You might have heard of the NSA tools that were leaked as part of their shadow brokers thing, where they basically we don't really know yet where from, got NSA tools, which turned up on the web, like, basically 0 days, and hacking, technologies, like ways of basically vulnerabilities in software that the NSA knew about, but nobody else. And some of that was used. So the Eternal Blue exploit, for example, was used with WannaCry, and even though at that time it was known as an exploit and it was patched, there were patches. Lots of companies hadn't deployed those patches. And what Symantec's now saying is that shadow brokers weren't the first to get their hands on these NSA tools. Whoever leaked them or however they got out, they're saying that hacker groups used some of those attacks before. And there's a group they call Buckeye or APT3 or Gothic Panda. By the way, this is fucking dumb. If you're not into IT security as much, every company, and when they research this stuff, give these groups their own name because they kind of want to brand it as their research. It's not really like if you used to actual research at universities and like where stuff is slower, and there's papers, and people will generally, a term will be established and people use that because Oxford University is not interested in like branding a research term or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that will come. Maybe this is a sign of things to come. But like these companies, obviously companies, and so they brand everything, and it's very confusing. Anyway, so they're saying that this group used these tools before. Also, Symantec, not saying that they're from China, but saying that other security companies or researchers have previously tied some of these groups to China. Not quite clear what a tied that is, but it's just an interesting story because you can kind of see how these hacking tools in 0 days, how they get out, and how dangerous it actually is for intelligence services to basically stockpile these 0 days, right? Instead of getting them fixed. I mean, the underlying thing is here, the NSA ostensibly has two missions. One is to spy on enemies of the United States, and the other one they always also underline, is that they also need to keep the government in the US safe. And so there's always this discussion and this field of rival interests, where security researchers and people who are interested in this will always say, well, that's kind of like, if you have two missions there that kind of don't go well with each other. So if you have a 0 day, if you're the NSA, you have a 0 day, so you know about the security vulnerability that probably nobody else in the world knows about. There's no two things you can do. You can sit on it and use it when you really need to use it, when it's really worth a lot to you. But then you have to keep it secret until that moment. And if you do that, obviously it doesn't get patched. So when you sit on that vulnerability for maybe years, waiting for the right moment to use it, which makes sense if you're an intelligence service, that vulnerability is in all the software. It's also in all the software that like your government uses. So in all that time you're sitting on it, it might be conceivable that a rival intelligence service will also figure out independently that this vulnerability exists and then use it against your government, which you couldn't protect because you were trying to keep it secret. And with stories like this, you see how this actually is happening in the real world. In Linux news, RHEL 8 is out, now released. I guess there's nothing much more I can say about this. If you use RHEL, you probably know this already. You know where you get your information. It's not really... It's RHEL. It's not like it's relatively boring for, desktop Linux users like you and me probably, if you're using Linux on the desktop. More interesting is that also in this register story that IBM has been given the go-ahead by regulators. So the SEC has basically International Business Machines Corporation. Yeah, sometimes forget what IBM stands for. So they've been given the go-ahead to finalize their merger or their acquisition of Red Hat. So that's happening. Really, the more interesting Linux story today is from Microsoft. And if you ask me, if you record this bit that I'm just saying, snip that out of the podcast and send it to Fab in the past, maybe 5 years, 10 years, I'd be saying that's crazy that I would ever say that. But it seems like the day of Linux, the day of Linux on the desktop, the year of Linux on the desktop is finally here. And it's been brought to us by Microsoft, because Microsoft has announced that in the next version of the Windows subsystem for Linux, Windows subsystem for Linux 2, they will actually ship a Linux kernel. So the way the Windows subsystem for Linux works right now is it's kind of a compatibility layer, a little bit like Wine. So you get something like you get a bash shell, and you can run native Linux commands and programs, and their syscalls and everything they need to do will be like translated through like a translation layer on the NT kernel. So you're running the Windows kernel, but you're running Linux commands and utilities on top of that. And with this, you would actually get a Linux kernel embedded in Windows. So you could use, you're running Windows, but you got a command line open, and you're running Linux tools, and you have like an embedded or whatever a Linux kernel somewhere in there, and it'll be like using Linux inside of Windows, and that's pretty amazing. And I mean, if that's not signs of an utopian future that I thought I would never live in, then the other thing they announced is in 2019. It's happening, people. In 2019, later in this year, Windows will get a command line interface that you can actually use. So they, Miguel de Casa, obviously now finally, at Microsoft. Oh, I'm blocked. He blocked me. Oh, that's great. Awesome. Thanks, Miguel. I interviewed that guy once. He's nice. He's probably just subscribing to some blog list. So yeah, but so I can't, like, if I click on this tweet now, obviously. Oh, actually, I get the story. Why do I get the story? Why don't I get the bloody tweet? Well, that doesn't work. Can I do like a private window? Let's do a porn window. Which I cannot show you anyway. Yes, so what they introduced is basically or they're gonna introduce, is just a new Windows terminal that has kind of a drop down where you can choose, okay, do I want the normal traditional command line, do I want PowerShell, or do I want the Linux shell? Like, do I want Ubuntu running in there, which is pretty amazing. Maybe they have some images of that in that, or they have GIFs. So obviously they're showing Docker here, because Docker is also a big thing for Microsoft. Oh, that's not the bloody terminal. Okay, let's go to my friends at Heise. I think they had a picture. What the hell? Everything's breaking. Heise.de, content encoding error. An error occurred during a connection to Heise.de. What the hell is happening? Is that my browser? Well, it loads on this. What is wrong, Firefox? What the heck? Windows. Okay, where the? I'm just. Let me just look for this story. I'm sorry about this. I don't know. Technology is This is what happens, right? I'm really like happy, and like I'm like, oh, technology is amazing, and we live in the future. And then you try to open a website, and everything like bloody explodes. And now I have to find that story live on the air. Anyway, it's time for more coffee. I just wanted to show you a picture of this terminal. I mean, come on. Why is that so hard? Wait, I did have that story in bookmarked somewhere, didn't I? Come on. Man. Why is this? Oh, archive. Okay. I'm just looking in my pocket. Where? Oh, here we go. Oh, it was on Gollum. It wasn't on Heise. No wonder I can't find it. Anyway, I'm just give me a quick second. I'm loading this up now. Here we go. No content error. So that's what it looks like. It's like a really nice looking ad. Get an ad, of course. Oh, for fuck's sake. Today everything is going wrong. Anyway, it's actually quite nice looking terminal, and I just love that drop down. That's why I wanted to show it to you. It's like this. It's really good. It's like 3D accelerated. Just look at that video. It's like Microsoft is fine. I mean, oh my god. I mean, for how many years did like developers say like, how shit is your command line? Like, can't you fix this? And in 2019, I mean, look at how that looks so good. That looks so good. As a Linux user, you actually want to use that. It's got emojis. It's got bloody emojis. Let's look at the video. It's tiling. I mean, unbelievable. We live in the strangest times. There's still wonders happening every day. Yeah, let's move through this quickly. I've been going for so long. In Germany, some news from the journalist union that I'm also a member of, DJV, Deutscher Journalistenverband, which is also like a job. So it's like an association, of journalists. It's not only a union. They're basically saying we live in really bad times where the government is doing a lot of social media. They're writing a lot of their own content. And so they're talking about the Foreign Office here, for example. And so they're reporting a lot of like PR, their own view on things, which in itself wouldn't be bad. But the DJV is also saying the other side is that they're more often denying requests from journalists for information. And I've actually I've seen this myself. In recent times, government offices just like denying requests or just giving you just blanket answers that don't have any real information in there, and at the same time, they're putting out their own view on channels, which is really bad for society in itself, probably, because you don't have critical voices. You just have a lot of PR, and when it's from companies and it's something like gaming, that's one thing. I mean, that's really unimportant. The worst thing that could happen there is you get some misinformation about the next game you buy. But if it's the Foreign Office, that gets into an area that you would call propaganda, maybe, and having less journalistic oversight there is definitely bad. Speaking of gaming, built that in there. See, a very interesting story on Golem here on Anno 1800, which has a lot of success right now. There's 1 million players, they're saying, and it's basically a news story about the fact that there are lots of games, like in Anno is one example, where it's like a historic setting, but it just like completely blanks on like the nasty parts of history connected to that. And they're quoting a sociologist called Felix Zimmermann, who's written a very interesting blog post, but I think he's summarizing research that he's doing, very long, obviously, on games and how game studios will build, stuff like Assassin's Creed Origins or Assassin's Creed in general, how they are building historic settings, but obviously in their own, like, with their own goals. And he's on this Golem story, they're quoting people from the Anno developers who are basically saying the values of Anno have always been light, bright, and good-natured. With it, it's understandable, if you're a company and you're trying to sell a game, but it also has lots of like negative connotations. I mean, if you're growing up with this and you're watching this, and they so the issue here is that they are making a very realistic and very tangible representation of the times. So the architecture is very period correct. The clothes the people wear are incredibly realistic and in cases really well researched. But then it completely blanks on like topics like colonialization and the slavery, the really ugly aspect. So Anno 1800 is obviously a game about the Industrial Revolution, but there's some really ugly aspects connected with that, like worker treatment. So you have an image here of like on the game where like workers are at strike, but I really doubt they're tackling like the really interesting but also very ugly topics of worker treatment during the Industrial Revolution, the rise of socialism, all the stuff connected to that. I find this really interesting as somebody who's really into video games and has studied history and has always been very interested in history. And I always thought video games have a very important role to play there. I mean, I got interested in history as a kid, basically because of video games, basically because I like to play Civilization. But then I realized that the depiction of world history in that game wasn't as it really was, and then I was interested in looking how stuff had really happened. But I guess the problem here is with games becoming more realistic, and this view the developers on purpose are creating of history in their game becoming more realistic, it becomes less and less likely that people will notice things missing and go and look them up and be interested in that. And you could see that in the future people actually you have versions of Assassin's Creed then they have versions for education where it's like, it's basically the game part taken out. It's just the world, and you can look at all the stuff they recreated and things. But obviously, they're like, even if they're trying to make it as realistic as possible with all its ugly aspects, of ancient Egypt, for example, it's still like a recreation, and you need to understand that that's based on our historic understanding of the times, which is by no means complete. Anyway, before I get into more, and here's just another quick gaming story that I have, and I'm gonna let you go. In other gaming news, Riot Games, who's having, pretty much a year ago, a story broke that there's sexism within the company, that people were fired, and they've been changing stuff in the company, but now Kotaku is reporting that it says here, months after 5 current and former employees filed lawsuits last fall and earlier this year alleging gender discrimination against League of Legends publisher Riot Games, Riot yesterday made motions to force 2 of those women into private arbitration, which would prevent them from taking legal action. Riot's argument is simple. Those women waived their rights to sue the company when they were hired. And yes, they did this. They signed contracts, which I guess in the US isn't actually that far-fetched and happens quite a lot, where like basically the employment contract says if you sign this contract, you agree to never sue the company, and you will do everything outside of court in settlement proceedings, which, I mean, why would these people sue the company when they knew they signed that in their employment agreement? I mean, and why would you sign that? Like, okay, it could be that they have overlooked that, but then really they're at the point where they went, okay, we're going to sue the company. The attorneys really should have done that due diligence and found that out. I just can't understand why you would sign a contract like this. I would never sign an employment contract that said that. I mean, you're just waiving rights that you might need as an employee. I mean, you need to write, if you're an employee of a company and they do something like really bad to you, you need to be able to sue them. Especially in the US, where that's basically your only recourse. Where if you're in the gaming industry, you don't have a union, you don't have any other representation as an employee. The only recourse you have is that you can sue people in the US. I think that's really bad, and it's not like the gaming industry. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a luxury industry, right? It's not like you're, it's not like you're really low, you're not qualified and you're really looking. I mean, yes, you might be a gaming developer, you're really looking for a job, but it's not like you couldn't take like another job, right? You really want to be in gaming, that's why you're there. Don't sign contracts like this, people. if you take anything away from today, just that, no job is good enough to sign that, to waive away like your fundamental rights like that. I mean, don't ever do that. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope 40 minutes almost. I made up for not being there yesterday, I hope. I'll be heading off now. I've got lots to do today. Got a bread to bake, lots of stories to write, got a podcast to produce. I'll see you tomorrow. I promise I won't take another day off this week. One day is enough. It's enough slacking. Anyway, until then, see you tomorrow. Have a nice day, and never waive the right to sue your employer, please. Okay? See you tomorrow.